Sliding filament theory successfully explain the process of muscle contraction. Sliding filament theory successfully explain the process of muscle contraction. Sliding filament theory proposed by Hugh Huxley and Gene Hansen. Hugh Huxley, Gene Hansen. They proposed the sliding filament theory. The central nervous system send the message to the muscle via motor neuron. Motor neuron release the message in the neuromuscular junction. From the neuromuscular junction, the message received by the muscle. Now the T-tubule excited. The T-tubule transfer the message to cisternae. Cisternae excited. The cisternae release calcium ions. Now the calcium ion concentration increases in the sarcoplasm. Some calcium ions bind to TNC subunit. When the calcium ion bind to TNC subunit, trophonin-tropomyosin complex move away from the active sites. Observe in the diagram, in the actin filament only actin protein. Trophonin and tropomyosin move away from the active sites. So active sites are exposed. So you already know meromycin head attaches to active site of actin protein. Now in the absence of ATP, means in the presence of ADP, meromycin head attaches to active site. Later the active site, so like this, you already know it is the mycin filament and these are the actin filament. Meromycins, 50% meromycins attached to active sites of one half of the I band. The remaining 50% meromycins attached to actin filaments of another half of the I band. So this meromycin pull the actin filament towards the mycin. This meromycin pull the actin filament towards the mycin. So actin filaments overlap. Observe, it is the relaxed sarcomere and it is the H zone. Due to continuous pulling, actin filaments slide over mycin. That's why H zone decreases. Observe, in maximum contracted sarcomere, actin filaments slide over A band. So entire A band contain both actin and mycin. What is H zone? H zone means the part of the myofibril, the part of the A band contain only mycin filament. But here both actin and mycin filaments are present. That means H zone disappear. So during muscle contraction, what happen? Observe, relaxed sarcomere. It is the half of the I band. Here it is the half. So I band decreases. Finally, in maximum contracted sarcomere, Z layer, A band, Z layer. That means I band and H zone decreases. For example, one half of the I band 2 millimeters, A band 10 millimeters, another half of the I band 2 millimeters, length of sarcomere 14 millimeters in relaxed state. In a maximum contracted state, the length of sarcomere become 10 millimeters. So here change occur in the I band only. During muscle contraction, no change in the length of A band, change in the I band only. So during muscle contraction, I band and H zone decrease, but no change occur in the length of A band. So now the meromycin head attaches to actin filament, pull the actin towards the mycin. Similarly, the remaining 50% of meromycins attaches to actin filaments of another half of the I band. They pull the actin filaments towards the mycin. So due to continuous pulling, actin filaments slide over, means overlap. Actin filaments overlap on the mycin filament. So now once again, the central nervous system send message. After receiving the message, muscle undergo contraction. The central nervous system send message to muscle through motor neuron. The motor neuron release the message in the neuromuscular junction. From the neuromuscular junction, the muscle receive the message. Now the T tubule excited, transfer the message to cisternae. Cisternae excited, release calcium ions into sarcoplasm. Numerous calcium ions present in the sarcoplasm. Some calcium ions bind to TNC subunit. When calcium ion bind to TNC subunit, troponin tropomyosin complex move away. Observe in the diagram, no troponin tropomyosin complex means move away. Now the myromycin head in the absence of ATP. In the absence of ATP means in the presence of ADP attaches to the active site. Later the myromycin head pull the actin filament towards the mycin. It is known as power stroke. After power stroke, ADP is separated from the ATP site. Later, so it is the power stroke. The myromycin pull the actin towards the mycin. It is known as power stroke. After power stroke, ADP separated. Later, myromycin head attain its original position. It is known as recovery stroke. Previously like this, recovery stroke. After recovery stroke, new ATP molecule attaches to the ATP site. Once the ATP molecule attaches to ATP site, the myromycin head detached from the active site. Detached from the active site. Now the head of myromycin act as ATPase enzyme. It hydrolyzes the ATP into ADP plus inorganic phosphate. By utilizing this energy, myromycin head attaches to active site, and this process is repeated till the central nervous system stop the sending of message. If the central nervous system continuously send the message, so continuously this process is repeated. This process is repeated during muscle contraction. Length of I band and H zone decrease. No change in the length of A band. No change in the length of A band. After some time, the central nervous system stop the sending of message. At the time, the cisternae, instead releasing calcium ions, they absorb the calcium ions. So they absorb the calcium ions. In the absence of calcium ions, troponin tropomyosin complex cover the active sites. Now what happened? Tropomyosin like this. Tropomyosin troponin complex cover the active site. Already attached myromycin heads are separated. New myromycin heads unable to attaches. Now the I band and H zone regain its original length. It is known as muscle relaxation. After some time, the central nervous system stop the sending of message. Now the cisternae absorb calcium ion from the sarcoplasm. In the absence of calcium ions, troponin tropomyosin complex cover the active site. Already attached myromycin heads separated. New myromycin heads unable to attaches. New myromycin heads unable to attaches. Now I band and H zone regain its original length. It is known as muscle relaxation. So some of you have got doubt here. Once whenever ATP molecule attaches to myromycin head separated from the active site. At the time I band may regain its original length. It is not possible. Reason is myromycin heads attaches and detaches from the active site for about 50 to 100 times per second, not per minute. So myromycin heads attaches and detaches. When attaches, so after utilizing energy attaches. Power stroke, recovery. After recovery stroke, ATP molecule attaches. At the time it detached. So myromycin molecule attaches and detaches for about 50 to 100 times per second. That's why, so once the myromycin head separated from the actin site of actin protein, actin filament may try, but immediately it again attaches and pull. That's why during muscle contraction, I band and H zone never regain their original length. So muscle contraction. Hugh Huxley and Gene Hansen proposed the theory, namely sliding filament theory. During muscle contraction, actin filaments slide over myosin. Actin and myosin myofilaments never undergo contraction. They slide over. Actin filaments slide over myosin. During muscle contraction, I band and H zone decreases and disappear. Now we discuss red muscle fibers and white muscle fibers. Red muscle fibers and white muscle fibers. Red muscle fibers. Some striated muscles are red in color due to presence of more amount of myoglobin. More amount of myoglobin. In white muscle fibers, myoglobin is less. So less amount of myoglobin. That's why they are pale or white in color. The second point, more number of mitochondria. More number of mitochondria. Red muscle fibers contain more number of mitochondria. Mitochondria contain ATP batteries. So energy batteries. ATP molecule, adenosine triphosphate. More number of mitochondria, more number of ATP molecules. In white muscle fiber, less number of mitochondria. Less number of mitochondria. So automatically less number of ATP. Less number of ATP. So due to presence of more number of ATP, red muscle fibers undergo aerobic respiration, utilize oxygen, oxidation of food. So in the presence of oxygen, undergo aerobic respiration. So due to presence of less number of mitochondria, undergo anaerobic respiration. Anaerobic respiration. They undergo anaerobic respiration. That's why lactic acid is formed. Lactic acid is formed. Due to accumulation of lactic acid, muscle undergo fatigue, great tiredness. One more point. Sarcoplasmic reticulum. Endoplasmic reticulum of the muscle is known as sarcoplasmic reticulum. Sarcoplasmic reticulum is less in red muscle fiber. Sarcoplasmic reticulum is more. If sarcoplasmic reticulum is more number of calcium ions are present. So more number of calcium ions are present, undergo powerful contraction. So white muscle fibers undergo contraction for a long time due to presence of more number of sarcoplasmic reticulum. Sarcoplasmic reticulum contains cisternae. Cisternae release calcium. So cisternae are the reservoirs of calcium ions. So due to presence of more number of calcium ions, the white muscle fibers undergo contraction for a long time when compared to red muscle fibers. Due to, so in red muscle fibers, more amount of myoglobin, more number of mitochondria, less number of sarcoplasmic reticulum. So due to presence of more number of mitochondria, undergo aerobic respiration. So they undergo anaerobic respiration. Red muscle fibers and white muscle fibers. Next one is joints. So what is joint? Joint is an empty place present between the two bones. We discuss different types of joints. Different types of joints. Joint also known as articulation or articulation. So it is end of one bone, it is end of another bone. Empty place present between the two bones is known as joint. Joint act as a fulcrum. Fulcrum means support. Joint act as a fulcrum. Depending upon the structures present in the joints, joints are of three types: fibrous joint, cartilaginous joint, and synovial joint. Fibrous joint. So in fibrous joint, fibers are present. So that is a dense irregular connective tissue is present. That is fibrous joint. If cartilage is present, that is cartilaginous joint. Fibrous joint. Fibrous joints are three types. So suture. joint. Empty place present between the two bones is known as joint. Some joints are movable, some joints are immovable. Joints are of three types: fibrous joints, cartilaginous joints, and synovial joints. So these are fibrous joints. Fibrous joints. So that is suture, gomphosis, and syndesmosis. Fibrous joints are of three types: suture, gomphosis, and syndesmosis. If the fibrous joint present as a zigzag line, so this zigzag line is the joint. So if the joint resemble like a zigzag line, and at the same time in the joint dense irregular connective tissue is present, or if the fibrous joint resemble like a zigzag line, that is known as a suture. Example, between the cranial bones. So it is immovable joint. It never allow the movement of the two bones. Next one, gomphosis. So gomphosis. In gomphosis, one bone permanently attaches with another bone with the help of fibrous joint. So that means gomphosis is another example for fibrous joint. In this joint also the two bones are immovable. Example, dentoalveolar joint, tooth, one bone. So what is alveolar joint? The cavity present in the jawbone resemble like a sac. Now the tooth fit into the cavity of jawbone. Jawbone one bone, tooth another bone. These two are held by periodontal membrane. Periodontal membrane is a irregular dense connective tissue. So if the dense connective tissue present between the two bones, that is the fibrous joint. So gomphosis, two bones are immovable. Gomphosis, two bones are immovable. Example, dentoalveolar joint. The joint present between the tooth and the jawbone. Between the jawbone and the tooth, periodontal membrane is present. Third one is syndesmosis. So here the joint is present lengthwise between the two bones. Tibia one bone, fibula another bone. Tibia, fibula present in the shank. In the shank two bones are present, tibia, fibula. These two bones, between these two bones, the fibrous joint is present. Between these two bones, the dense irregular connective tissue is present, and it is slightly movable. Syndesmosis is slightly movable. Syndesmosis, if the fibrous joint is present lengthwise between the bones, that is known as syndesmosis. It is present between tibia and fibula. The syndesmosis slightly allow the movement of the two bones. So suture, gomphosis, and syndesmosis. So what is joint? Joint or articulation. Empty place present between the two bones is known as joint. If dense irregular connective tissue is present, that is fibrous joint. If cartilage is present, cartilaginous joint. Synovial fluid is present in the joint capsule, that is synovial joint. Joints are of three types: fibrous joint, cartilaginous joint, synovial joint. If the fibrous joint present as a zigzag line, that is known as suture. Sutures are present between the cranial bones. Suture is immovable joint. Next one, gomphosis. So the fibrous joint present between the gomphosis also immovable. So tooth fit into the socket of jawbone. It is known as gomphosis. Example, dentoalveolar joint. Dentoalveolar, tooth and alveolar means a sac-like cavity of the jaw. Dentoalveolar joint. If the fibrous joint is present lengthwise between the two bones, it is known as syndesmosis between tibia and fibula. This joint slightly allow the movement of the two bones. In gomphosis, periodontal membrane is the dense irregular connective tissue present between the jawbone and the tooth. Now we discuss cartilaginous joints. Next one is cartilaginous joint. If cartilage present between the two bones, or if cartilage present in the joint, that is known as cartilaginous joint. It is of two types, synchondrosis and symphysis. If hyaline cartilage present between the two bones, known as synchondrosis. If fibrous cartilage present between the two bones, known as symphysis. Epiphysis is one bone, diaphysis is another bone. Between epiphysis and diaphysis, epiphyseal plate is present. Epiphyseal plate is nothing but hyaline cartilage. Cartilaginous joint. If joint contain cartilage, what is joint? Empty place present between the two bones is known as joint. If joint contain cartilage, known as cartilaginous joint. If hyaline cartilage present between the two bones, it is known as synchondrosis. Epiphysis is one bone, end of the long bone epiphysis, middle part of the long bone diaphysis. Between epiphysis and diaphysis, epiphyseal plate is present in the long bones of children. So epiphyseal plate is nothing but hyaline cartilage. So hyaline cartilage present between the two bones. So what is synchondrosis? If hyaline cartilage present between the two bones, it is known as synchondrosis. Example, epiphysis and diaphysis. So example is epiphyseal plate present between epiphysis and diaphysis in long bones of children. So in children, during the growth, diaphysis grow toward the epiphysis. At the time, epiphyseal plate disappear. So what is cartilaginous joint? If the joint contains cartilage, known as cartilaginous joint. It is of two types, synchondrosis and syndesmosis. If hyaline cartilage present between the two bones, known as synchondrosis. Epiphyseal plate is a hyaline cartilage. So epiphyseal plate is a hyaline cartilage present between epiphysis and diaphysis. Example for synchondrosis. Symphysis. If fibrous cartilage present between the two bones, known as symphysis. Intervertebral disc is a fibrous cartilage. It is present between the vertebrae. So vertebrae are bones. So if fibrous cartilage present between the two bones, known as the symphysis. Example, intervertebral disc present between the vertebrae. Next one, synovial joint. Synovial joint. Synovial joint. Synovial joint is present in joint capsule. It is the joint capsule. It is end of one bone, it is end of another bone. So the joint is covered by two membrane, outer dense irregular membrane, inner synovial membrane. From the dense irregular membrane, ligaments also present in dense irregular membrane. The ligaments connect one bone to another bone, prevent the dislocation of the bones from the joint. End of each bone contain hyaline cartilage known as articular cartilage. So the articular cartilage, so during movement what happen, articular cartilage of one bone articulated with articular cartilage of another bone. So bones never subjected to damage. The synovial membrane produce synovial fluid. Synovial fluid acts as a lubricant. In old age, synovial fluid decreases at the time. So climbing of staircase is difficult. In the beginning, so at the time the doctor inject synovial fluid into the synovial cavity. So after 1 or 2 years, that is also no use. So at the time, knee replacement surgery. Replace the knee. What is knee? Ventral surface of two bones are connected by patella. Patella is known as a knee. So patella or knee bone. That is a sesamoid bone. So later we discuss. Means a tendon converted into bone, that is patella. So synovial joint. In synovial joint, the two bones are held by two membranes. Outer dense irregular membrane, inner synovial membrane. Dense irregular membrane also contain ligaments. The ligaments held the two bones in their position. So ligaments prevent the dislocation of the bones in the joint. The end of each bone covered by hyaline cartilage known as articular cartilage. The synovial membrane releases synovial fluid. The synovial fluid acts as a lubricant. All synovial joints are freely movable. All synovial joints are freely movable. So synovial joints are of 6 types. Ball and socket joint, ball and socket joint, hinge joint, pivot joint, gliding joint, saddle joints, condyloid joint. Condyloid joint. So synovial joints are of 6 types. Ball and socket joint, it is the ball and socket joint. Hinge joint, elbow joint and knee joint known as elbow joint. Pivot joint, rotatory movement. So like this, rotatory movement. So pivot joint present between atlas and axis, first and neck vertebra. Gliding joint between the carpals and tarsus, ankle bone. Gliding joint. Saddle joint. Saddle joint between carpal and metacarpal of thumb. Condyloid joint. So between the metacarpals and carpals, condyloid joint, or we may say yes or no, that is also due to movement of condyloid joint. So tomorrow we are going to discuss in detail with the help of diagram 6 types of synovial joint. All synovial joints are freely movable. Ball and socket joint, hinge joint, pivot joint, gliding joint, saddle joint and condyloid joint.